Recording is on.
Hello, Global Theater. My name is Gerry Fialka. It's June 11, 2021. We want to thank Clinton Ignatoff for his help and his brilliance. And it's a real honor and a pleasure to be here with Mark Street. Hello, Mark.
Hello, Gerry. Nice to be back with you. I wish you were making me a sandwich, but that'll have to be for another time.
Well, it was October 25th, 2008, 13 years ago. We did our first interview and we've had encounters since then. But I never go back and study any of my interviews over 35 years. I don't have time. I rather do new ones. But in this case, I had to, because there's so many new questions that have been added. I didn't want to repeat them. And it was so thoroughly important for me to do this because I learned so much about how bad of an interviewer I am. And I step all over the place. I step on you all the time and try to, impress you with cute anecdotes. And it's like, you really held up well. So I want to compliment you on that regard too, besides being a great filmmaker and a teacher.
Well, Gerry, it's not an interview. It's a conversation, man.
I know.
It's between us. So yeah. You don't step on anybody. We work together.
It's good. Great attitude. So the first question is simple. Why did humans invent language?
Do you know that I called myself Santa Claus for this? Is that all right?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Everything's all right.
Okay, good. Everything's good. Yeah. I thought it'd be cute, but maybe not. Why did human beings invent language? Fellowship. They needed to communicate with one another. They could only get so far without it. And they needed to get together. They needed to get together. They couldn't be alone anymore. They wanted to stave off the alienation that comes from being human.
Yeah. Well put. And so I love the word fellowship because we're navigating this ship together. So Lily Tomlin said that humans invented language to complain. And yeah, that's good. You laugh. That's funny. But it is funny because I heard that complaining and gossiping, well, you'll live longer if you do that. Now, you're in the education world. And there's a fine line between complaining and critical thinking. Can you discuss what you've learned in your decades, I would say, of teaching? What is that fine line between complaining and critical thinking? How do you navigate that one?
That is such a good question. What happened here, and maybe we shouldn't talk about technical things, but somehow my screen went a little darker and yours went a little lighter. I don't know what the deal with that is, but
there's many factors. It's called servers, computers. I never fret about it because your picture will jump out. Sometimes you'll just be Santa Claus, and sometimes I'll see your face. So
okay. Yeah, don't worry.
Okay,
that sounds good. Listen, that's a great question. I'll answer by way of anecdote. Every once in a while, I love my students, and you as a teacher, you want to support them, and you don't want to be antagonistic. And there's really no such thing as a bad reaction or a bad question or a bad response to a film. You want everything to be in the learning realm, but I think that the difference for me between a critical response and a complaining response is I don't like that, or that shouldn't have been made, or that was a waste of my time. And it's almost a capitalist thing. I invested in this university, or I invested in this class, or I invested in this, I'm sitting here in class rather than smoking dope, and you showed me a film that wasted my time, right? And my
Yeah.
feeling is, I mean, there's limits to this, but look, everything's worthy of something, and if it's an hour of your life or 30 minutes of your life or 4 minutes of your life or John Dielman, 4 hours of your life, there's value in that. And if you don't like it, you don't like it. If you find it turgid, that's fine. If you find it sexist, if you find it taxing, those are all wonderful adjectives and wonderful things to talk about it. But if you just say I don't like it, wasting my time. I found that to be a crucial divide between critical thinking and dismissiveness. And it's really interesting about the idea of complaining. You said that Lily Tomlin said we invented language to complain. You could say that about, what's her name, Franny Leibowitz. Did you see Marty Scorsese's thing about Franny Leibowitz?
Brilliant. Yes,
Yeah.
love it.
But a lot of these folks, I mean, some family members and things, they live to be, post 100 just so they can make your life just absolutely miserable with their complaints, So you sort of feel like more the hell power to them, I mean,
They're getting
there's
it
life
out of
force in that,
They're getting it out of their system. That's why they live long.
That's why they live long, to torment the rest of us. Yes. So good for them.
But what is then, how you define complaining beautifully? It's more like making a value judgment, I like or I dislike. But what is critical thinking then?
Well, I use some adjectives to describe it. I think
Right.
if you delve into a work and, Gerry, you look at one of my films and you say, look, I think you were trying to do this, Mark, but it fell short in the following ways, or you lost me here, or you overdid this, or you underdid this, or you didn't tie this up, or that's critical thinking, and that's valuable, and that's love, that's what is it? Is it Mao that says criticism is the best form of love? Chairman Mao, probably not the right guy to be quoting, but you know what I mean. In terms of Marxist dialectics, that kind of engagement, critical thinking involves engagement, and you can't engage what you dismiss, right? You can't just say I don't like it. Sitting here like this, I don't like it. I'm not moving. I don't like it.
Yeah. It's really well put, Mark. Thanks. So my another friend taught me the 3 T's, the 3 tenets. He applies it to music: technique, theory, and taste. So we can apply that to filmmaking, which we're involved in and talking about a lot now. In, technique, as a film teacher, you can say, here's how you push this button and wiggle this mouse and adjust this lens. Okay, theory is, we can study, all the greats, Zygmunt Vertov, or whoever we're going to study, Chris Marker, and we can study theory and how people have analyzed and done critical thinking on these. But how does one acquire taste? How does one, and I sort of call taste aesthetic. So you can define taste as you may, and then how does one acquire that? Or in your case, how do you teach taste? Or
That's
do you?
so interesting. First of all, I have no interest in teaching taste.
Yeah.
I think that, I had no interest in creating a bunch of little Mark Streets. One is too many. One is too many. And students are confused by this, because I think somewhere embedded in the academic infrastructure is this idea that, I don't want to just pull names out of a hat here, but Maya Deren begets another filmmaker, and that filmmaker begets another filmmaker, these styles, and there are these a curator whose name you would know, but I won't quote him, talked to me once about the spice routes of avant-garde film, right? And I thought, well, that's stupid. Spice routes, first of all, weren't the spice routes based on slavery, trading slaves for nutmeg and stuff like that, And second of all, if somebody studied at Binghamton with a great filmmaker there, it doesn't mean that person should be making films that are like that great filmmaker's work, right? That person should develop her own vision. And that's what I try to do with my film, my students, and I frustrate them to no end, because there's nothing more aggressive than giving someone too much freedom, So I say, listen, you gotta give me a film to look at by this certain date. And they say, well, what is it about? And I said, well, that's up to you, And they say, is it a documentary, or do I have to use a tracking shot in it, or a tripod, or handheld? And I said, well, that you got to figure out on your own. And silent, and sound, and simplicity, and complexity, and narrative, and plot, that comes from within, So those things are malleable. And I think that I'm worried I'm repeating myself from 12 years ago, but there's plenty of, let's just take it out of the realm of music and film and talk about literature. There are plenty of people that, their books are not to my taste, but I'll read one every once in a while and admire it, somebody like Cormac McCarthy or somebody like that, you know, and say, well, I'm not really into that macho stuff, or that kind of survivalist right-wing thing, but it's really pretty well written, and I can enter into that world and enjoy being there for a while.
Yeah, Mark, that was so well put, because I will drop names. Yeah, we've 60 years in Ann Arbor this coming next year. We've seen 1 million James Benning clones, and they come out of James Benning or whoever, you can just name the list, and then their first film is a ripoff on their professor, and that's the best film they do. Then they try to find their own voice, and it's like they're fucked. So that's an unfair. But you'd say to Craig Baldwin, "You're a Bruce Conner clone." And he'd go, "Thanks for the compliment." Same with the Coen brothers. You go, "Wow, you guys are good Preston Sturges clones." They'd go, "Wow, thanks for the compliment." So, but it's back to the question a little, just briefly. How did you form taste in film? How did you form aesthetic?
Yeah, that's you did ask that question. I did not answer it.
That's all right.
I found myself very torn. There were a lot of things that interested me, to me, avant-garde means Catholic with a small c, all embracing, right? It means a 1-minute film that is a single shot. It means, really, really heavily montaged and edited films. It's a Canadian filmmaker. I can never remember the name of Norman McLaren, not Norman McLaren. The other guy, the guy which worked for the CBC. Anyway,
Arthur Lipset.
Yeah, Arthur Lipset. Love that guy. I love those films.
Dude, wait, one thing. Did you know he edited his soundtrack first and cut his picture to the soundtrack?
Totally. Yeah.
That's why Kubrick shit a brick when he saw it. He said, "I want you to make the trailer for Dr. Strangelove." And Lucas said, "Dude, that's the best experimental film I ever saw." And then he committed suicide. It's like, whoops.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great example, Mark. Yeah.
Yeah. So all these things intrigue me. You know, I mean, I would see films that were short, long, you know, durational, montage based, and as long as I felt something in them, um, I felt like my taste was developing along with them. You know.
Beautiful, Mark. Now, this is a little personal. I hope you don't take offense, but I love a moment when we were discussing your life because you have an amazing wife who makes films. You have two amazing daughters. And you said, there's one too many Mark Streets. But when you told me once you were sitting on the couch and your daughters went, "You're a lazy bum." All you do is sit around. And I thought that is the coolest thing because to me, I know you're a hardworking person and your favorite thing in our interview 13 years ago was what's the best thing for a human being? And you said enthusiasm. That's you're enthusiastic. You're into it. But I felt that you also were able, by telling me that observation by your daughters, to reveal that you have slack and you can find peace of mind. And like George Carlin said, whatever happened to letting kids stare out the window?
Yeah.
So you've juggled this work ethic and slack, peace of mind. You seem to be a happy human being. You're productive. And how, you know, where did your work ethic come from?
It's a really good question. You know, I read this thing the other day. Judy Collins, of all people, I have no feelings one way or the other about Judy Collins, but she had this great story, and she said, and then this is not. I'm using drinking as a metaphor here, right?
Yeah.
Not about alcohol per se, but she said, I discovered folk music and drinking at the same time, right? Like
Yeah.
she was a concert pianist and her father was this, kind of classic, what do you call it? Taskmaster, right? So
Yeah.
she was always at rehearsal and he was always pushing her and pushing her and pushing her. And then she figured, and then she started to go into coffee shops and she said, I could have like 3 drinks before this folk music, and have a lot better time. Like you can't do that with classical music. You can't have 3 drinks and go out on a stage. And then, of course, she had problems with alcohol, and her father, ended up apologizing and saying, "Look, I know I pushed you too hard and things like that." But I think that for me, I look at things I could have done in the industry. I was just talking to a friend of mine who's in the Editors Guild in LA, and they're going to show my film Work Songs out there as part of their Labor Day Cine Club out there. And I think, what would it have been like if I had entered the industry, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think I would have been sitting on that couch that day when my daughters saw me then, And for me, here's something I admire greatly about Craig Baldwin, and I know you admire so much about him. You integrate your work into your life and into your into how you are, and whether that's waking up at 10 o'clock in the morning or working, late into the night or taking a few days off or, working for 45 minutes a day or following some path that's going to go nowhere or somewhere. All that's part of the thing, I'll tell you another story about my daughters. You're going to love this. The younger generation, they're more afraid of these vaccines than a lot of people our age. I don't know how you feel about the vaccines.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Yep.
Yeah,
I know.
Yeah. So my daughters said to me, they said you're going to get your second vaccine on Tuesday. This is months ago. And they said, you better take some time off. I said, what are you talking about? I said, it's all time off. And, the world's not going to fall apart because some experimental film doesn't get made. Are you kidding? If I start to feel tired, I'll take a nap, but I'm not some brain surgeon or something. You know, no one's depending on me.
Mark, you're cracking me up. It's all time off. Yeah, it's like, Craig and me and you, we got that from Duchamp. Get your life and your job as mixed up as possible. So
Totally.
there's like, oh, I got to go home and relax now. But again, the question was, where did you get your work ethic? Even though you're a master at Slack and you know how to get your work in life, I'll tell you, the funny thing is if you look at work ethic in Wikipedia, about the third paragraph down, it goes, this could be a scam by consumer capitalism. But you do have a work ethic, even though you have that balance. Where did you get it from?
Well, that's interesting. I mean, I think that I'm happiest when I'm working. It animates me. It gets me outside of myself. It allows me to invest in a project, to invest in something that is beyond myself. I grew up around a sort of more conventionally work ethic oriented person. My father, he was a Depression era guy, and I always just thought that work was sort of the sort of the thing you ran to,
Yeah.
the thing that kept you going, in whatever form that is, whatever form that is, whether it's scrolling something on your hand, whether it's, coming up with an idea, whether it's, spending an afternoon doing something that doesn't end up to be anything at all, whether it's, spending a week editing something and deciding it's not quite right, finishing a film, whatever that is, that's the work ethic. And I remember, from an early age, undergrad, staying up days and days and days editing and just getting more and more into it. And it's almost the obsession of the thing itself that keeps you going. You just keep at it,
I think what you're saying is you got it from your parents. Your dad, that's where most people say they got their work ethic from their parents. But it could be hardwired in us, whatever. You answered it fine. Now, can you conjure up your earliest memory ever, or one of them?
I remember we lived in a house, Beloit, Wisconsin, and I remember the blacktop had just been redone, so it was the smell of the blacktop and the dark color of blacktop of the driveway, and I think there was some tricycle involved or something like that. But I remember that quite a bit. I remember the sort of smell and the sight of this almost like black leader, right? Almost.
How heavy. That is heavy, Mark, because no one brings up smell in their memory. That's beautiful. So is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
Memory more a curse or more a blessing? I think about this as we get older and our cognitive abilities decline a little bit, and I see it in my relatives and things, and I think there have been a number of great filmmakers, including Alan Berliner's first cousin, Twice Removed, I believe is the name of it, about his cousin who had Alzheimer's. He was a great poet, and he had Alzheimer's, and he and Alan learned a new way of communicating that was not based on the kind of sharpness that you and I are somewhat exhibiting today in today's interview. You know what I mean? And it's a different kind of almost onomatopoeia, tag team, almost singing to each other, almost, creating poetry and making sounds and things like that. So at my best, I think the thing about cognitive decline or memory, you asked about memory, is I have one family member. I don't want to mention anybody by name, And just in a very mild way, we talk about books a lot. And she forgets the names of the books that she reads, but she's completely at ease with it. Completely at ease, and it's almost like, that kind of ribald joke that, the person with Alzheimer's is always a virgin, right? And,
Yeah.
it's like if you forget what book you read, you can just read the thing again and it's still new.
Yeah.
So I'm sort of coming to terms with that myself a little bit these days. And it's interesting. I don't know. It's interesting what you remember, what you care to remember, what it's important to remember. All those things fit in, I think.
Yeah, it's beautiful what you said there. I'm going through that myself. I know my dad lasted till 95, but he had dementia and Alzheimer's, and like I've got elements of it now. They say that if you forget where your keys are, you don't have it. But if you forget what your keys are for, you're in trouble.
Yeah,
And I think
I've heard that exact same thing. I have not been there yet. Yes, yes.
And so I think however humans were made, that they said, let's just return them to being kids at the end and like give them a break so they don't have to worry about shit anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and you brought up the word worry earlier. What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
Um, what do I worry about? The pandemic has changed a lot of our fears, I think. I'm not really afraid of getting COVID anymore. It seems like it's under control and things like that. I think that what I worry about these days, and this is very specific, is that some of the social muscles that I have developed over the last 57 years and ways of being have atrophied a little bit in the last 15 months. You know what I mean?
What's that word mean? What do you mean?
Well, that they haven't been, we use muscles, right? And we haven't been as social as we have been.
Yeah, I got it.
So every once in a while, I'm like, well, what's it like going back into society, I like to do things like, go see music, usually by myself, and what's that going to be like? And
Yeah.
did I forget how to do that? Did I forget how to just sit and listen to music?
You mean live music?
Live
You mean
music.
live? Yeah.
Yeah.
Because Mark, I'll tell you, here's a heavy observation to apply to what you just said. I've done events with people live in a room for 35 years. Over the last year, my events have been better on Zoom because everybody's attentive. They're in their box. They didn't have to worry about parking or getting there. I didn't have to set up chairs, and they're better. I'm sorry to say. My events are better. It's just proven. I've observed this and I'm so happy. And I will still have a few live events now, but most of my events are going to be on Zoom from this point out because it's just more effective and easier. And so that's just my observation. So I think we are using those social muscles in a little different way, but we're basically paying attention to each other's heads and eye contact and verbal exchange, and you get a little hand gesture.
Yeah,
You're not looking at the rest of the body, and your head's not spinning around the room, in doing all these things. So that was good. So you brought up fear. Do thoughts create emotions?
Do thoughts create emotion? Thoughts created. Yeah, I think they do. I think they do. I think they do. I think that again, not to go back to the pandemic a little bit, but I think that I think we've all had some experiences of of information, or I mean, you'd have to define what a thought is as opposed to an emotion. But all this information that's come at us over the last 16 or 18 months, 15 months, I think it stirred up a lot of fear in people, and a lot of distrust, and a lot of questioning of what is rationalism, what is who's telling what narrative, who's telling what story, et cetera, et cetera. So sure, I think those things can morph quite easily, and I'm trying to figure out how to say this, but I think there are ways that there are ways that emotions can trump logic, or can trump thoughts. You know what I mean? I mean, that's essentially what a panic attack is, right? A panic attack is that I don't want to talk about my life, but everybody's had a panic attack. And a panic attack is where in your mind that you're not going to have a heart attack, or you're not going to die, but you feel like you're going to, right? And that's when logic and logic and emotion get all tangled up and mixed up. And that's not an uncommon thing for our time. Certainly not for my students. Certainly not for people my age, your age, any age.
Yeah, no, that was well put in. I love that term, panic attack. I'm going to do a film workshop on panic attack. So what do you think about this thinking now? Is thinking more innate in humans or more invented? I know it's both and it depends, but just what's your inclination or your impulse or your gut feeling? Did we invent thinking, or is it innate in us?
Well, some would say it's the thing that separates us from other animals and things like that. I think it is innate. I'm just going to say that.
Yeah,
I think it's the thing we can't turn off.
that is amazing. Can't turn it off. That's Bridget Bardot says, when I make love, I don't think. It's like, good luck.
Yeah.
Can't turn it off. That is like, when they teach you meditation. Okay, now think about not thinking. Okay, I'm thinking about not thinking. Wait, that's a trick.
Yeah.
So fill in the blank, Mark. I don't know what I think until I
don't know what I think until I can't do it. Sorry. I'll pass.
That is great. Well, McLuhan said, I don't know what I think until I've said it. And Joan Didion says, I don't know what I think until I've written it down. But
well,
Walter,
I don't know what I think until I've made it. I mean, I've said that before.
Yeah, until I made it. That's good. That's good. Oh, so what is more fundamental, music or language?
Music.
And why did humans invent cinema? We went to the first question was, why did we invent language? Why did we invent cinema?
I think that I think we wanted to lose ourselves. I think cinema allows us to lose ourselves for 4 minutes or 8 minutes or 12 minutes or 15 minutes or whatever, and it's a burden to be thinking all the time, and it's a burden to be it's a burden to be Gerry Fialka, and it's a burden to be Mark Street, right?
Not right now. There's no burden here. This is fun.
This is fun right here, but it's 24/7. It's a burden. So maybe not for you. I won't speak for you. For me,
No, I know what you're saying. It's
for
a great.
me, it gives me a little bit of respite, for myself.
Yeah. No, you know what you taught me? Amazing. And this is why it's sad I don't go through my interviews. That 13 years ago, you taught me, you were talking to a writer friend and they says, I love to read because then I don't have to think. That was a great statement because that's, you go into a movie. I've never, I'm Lex Dixic and dyslexic. I go into movies. I don't know what happened. People are like, well, what happened? I go, I don't know. I was just, wandering. My brain just went off and wandering, fall asleep, think about this. And, wow, that was a good movie. Harry Smith nailed it. The purpose of cinema is to put us to sleep. So we're all sleeping together. And we're dreaming awake. We're dreaming, we're all dreaming the same dream.
Yeah. No, I can dig it. I'm fine now, but 10 years ago or something, I had some real problems sleeping. I just couldn't sleep. And the only place I could sleep was in the movie theater.
Nice.
So I would go to a matinee. I'd wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning and have a bad morning, and then around, I'd go to the earliest show, like a 1 o'clock show or a 2 o'clock show, and then I just go right out, and there are all these great moments of like the guy sweeping up the popcorn at the end of the show. Hey, sir, sir, it's time for the next, or this old guy. This is Film Forum in New York. Of course, the only people going to the movie theater then, I don't know who goes now, but the only people going to the movie theater then are the older crowd, And this guy said, this guy came back. He goes, you're snoring. You need to either leave or get it together or whatever, And I said, look, man, I'm fighting this insomnia problem. So this is my hospital here. This is my clinic, And anyway, I'm fine now. But I thought it was great. I thought, what if there's this institute for insomnia and it was all about movies, right? All about movies. And you could make the greatest chairs and the greatest. And the greatest kind of cinema just for putting people out into this, sleepy zone. Be beautiful.
Oh, that was so well put. This is what I really love is how this can happen in these situations. And 2 things you evoked really quick was Billy Wilder says, I just hope they like my movie as much as the popcorn. Because I at University of Michigan, one of my film professors, this is before they taught film, and it was just like part of an English class or something, talking about films. He said the popcorn theory, if you serve popcorn, they'll like your movies better. And it's true. It's probably this thing that we grew up with, knowing you eat popcorn and it becomes this thing. But I'll tell you really quick, I went to this big fancy film festival in Hollywood to see Room 237, Rodney Asher's brilliant doc on Kubrick. And both me and my friend are older, and we met Rodney in the bar before, and we're hanging out, and then we go in and see the film, and it starts at 9:30. We're both in sleep by and so I'm really trying to pay attention, and all of a sudden one of the people in the film go, Well, why did James Joyce write Finnegan's Wake? And me and my friend are Wakians, and I wake up and hear that, and I just elbow him, and I goes, "Did you hear that line?" And that's what the wake is all about: dreaming awake and sleeping anyway. So it is that, that's another. You give me all these ideas to do film lectures that you can hire me to give to your students. It's called Cinema as a Hospital and a sleeping clinic. So do you more pursue meaning or more pursue happiness?
In the work or in my life?
You put it in the context you want. Yeah.
No, more meaning,
Yeah.
and less happiness.
Yeah. Does
I
the
don't expect
brain more?
happiness.
Yeah, that's good. Does the brain more detect consciousness or create consciousness? Like, is consciousness this thing bubbling away and we're detecting it, or are we actually creating it?
I think we're creating it.
Yeah.
I think consciousness is what we're. I don't think there's a set thing such as consciousness. I think consciousness is what we're interacting with, what our brain is interacting with.
Yeah. What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
Speed of thought.
Dude, there's no right or wrong answers to any of these questions, but that one you got right. Okay, how about this one, Mr. Smarty Pants Know It All? If God does exist, what do you want God to say to you after you die?
I want her to say, you gave more than you took.
Wow. That's beautiful, Mark. Talking about women, Audre Lorde, the poet, said, "You can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools." Yvonne Rainer responded, "You can if you expose the tools." What new tool do you suggest?
What new tool do I suggest for dismantling the master's house?
Yeah. Or for any reason. Again, you put in the context you want. You can go anywhere you want.
Well, I think that it's a good question. I'll tell you the tools I admire the most, and those are the ones that I don't understand.
Wow.
When you see it work and you're like, I don't. This is working on me, but I don't understand how it's working on me. Now that's fascinating. That's new, and I'm trying to think of a good example, but trying to think of something I've seen lately that mystified me. Where I thought this is put together in a completely completely new way. I'm thinking of Small Axe. Did you see that series on Netflix? I can't remember who directed it. I can look it up.
I haven't, but I'll check it out.
It's a
So
series.
what
It's a series of films about Caribbean experience in London and in the 80s. And it's sort of like Handsworth songs, that documentary. It's sort of like that era. But there's like there's there's 5 parts, I think. There's a 40-minute sequence, and then there's an hour and a half sequence, and there's a 20-minute sequence. And I thought, wow, this is really like using television or using the epic, you know, to really you know, look at an oppressive system, meaning the police system in London in the 80s, and the way it treated Caribbean immigrants. And it's using all these different, you know, all these different tools, all these different links, all these different stories, all these different um, you know, paradigms. And I found that it was cumulative. You know, I found that one story was more narrative based, right? It was about a kid who was considered stupid, sent to a special school, you know, for black kids because he wasn't learning at the same rate, until his mother got in there and said, that's ridiculous. He just, you know, English is his second language. And then there was a party scene that was just all observational, and it was all this reggae music, and it was all these little moments, and all that mixed together. I thought was really, really, really great. Steve McQueen, he's the director.
Oh yeah, there you go, Steve. He's amazing. Yeah, and we're not talking the old movie star. Steve is he come out of the art world and made it in Hollywood. It's pretty it's pretty remarkable. So yeah, George Clinton says the same thing. Mark, he says, what kind of music do you like? He says, I like the kind of music I don't understand, that mystifies me, that like, well, it's fucking my shit up. Why? You know, that I really like how you put that. You put it in understand and mystify. Those are two good verbs. But let's stay on this for a second. How do you navigate between fly on the wall documentary making and fly in the soup documentary filmmaking? you know, there's the big thing. You can define what direct cinema is and cinema verite, and we know how much the documentarian has put themselves in the film, and we know how much they haven't. You know, you take Frederick Wiseman, you say he's the most pure. He goes, I'm reality fiction. He knows what he's doing, and he knows it depends a lot. And who cares if you add music or don't or blah, blah, blah. But, you know, this is a big thing. You know, we're fans of the poetic docs and the real good nitty gritty docs. But, you know, how do you determine which approach you're going to do, and what's your feelings on this fly in the soup versus fly on the wall?
Well, first of all, I mean, I think that every film has its own. Every film should direct you, right?
Yeah.
You know, and there are films that should be flying the wall, and there are films that should be flying the soup, right? And you make that determination. I'll give you an example about the last film I finished called Work Songs. You know, I sort of decided not to put myself in it, you know, not to be a character in it, more observational. And then right at the end, I said, well, no, let me bring a little bit more back in, you know, let me bring, you know, let me create my own character a little bit more. So I think it's really the material, you know.
Yeah.
You don't want to stand in the way of the material, and you also don't want to pretend to be objective, right? So somewhere in there is a decision that you have to make for yourself about where you are in relation to the material, right?
Yeah.
What kind of worker you are, what kind of interview you are, what kind of questions you're asking, you know, and it's the work that will tell you where to be, you know.
Yeah.
No right or wrong answer.
Really well put. And it reminds me of just the roots of me admiring your film. What's the film where you ask people, you know, something like some question like I ask people, like, what's the meaning of life or something? And, you know, you ask the UPS driver, what's the name of that film?
Happy.
And what's it?
It's called Happy.
And then what's the question you ask?
Are you happy?
Oh my God. Now, what's the roots of you doing that approach? Was it Joan Rooshes or growing up? There's a guy who did this on the streets in radio in San Francisco. I forgot his name, but it's pretty much, I was really influenced by you bringing that. They call it person on the street interviews,
Right.
But what's your roots on that? Where do you think you first saw that or got inspired to do it yourself?
Well, that's just, it's basically just a remake of, as you say, of Chronicle of a Summer and by Jean Rouch and Edgar Morin, and then Pretty Month of May by Chris Marker, So that's a remake, basically,
Yeah. But
Good
did you
around
think,
that.
I'm just saying, is there something in your life before that you were attracted to those when you saw those? Just the idea of something, I know my roots came from watching Mike Douglas with my mom on TV, and he just asked people questions.
Yeah.
So I'm
Well,
just curious.
well, I think that the great thing about filmmaking is it gives you a chance to ask questions that you ordinarily wouldn't. It gives you a chance to
Yeah.
be nosy. You know,
Yeah.
so maybe I'll talk about my last film, Work Songs. You're sitting at a dinner party and you don't know anybody, and the conversation is sort of petered out. And if you just say for the table, here's a question for the table. What's the weirdest job you ever had? And
Yeah.
I might even ask you to answer that question, Gerry.
Yeah.
People can talk for hours. People have had all these weird jobs. They've done all these weird things. They've run into all these characters. They've set up bowling pins. They've,
Yeah.
been barkers outside of transsexual nightclubs. I think Lynn Sachs did that. Everybody's done something for one night or for 2 years or for 6 years that was really weird.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, my daughters. I hate to keep bringing them in, but they were good students and learned a lot and went to these good public high schools in New York. But my daughter, she'd get home from school and like all kids say, "Hey, how was school?" Say, well, it was all right. We learned this, we learned that. Then she got a job around the corner at a Greek restaurant when she was about 16. And she came home and she had all these great stories. You ask somebody about a history class and they're like, well, whatever. I don't know, whatever. You can talk about Civil War, you can talk about the Vietnam War. Plenty to say, right? Plenty to say. But she came home from this job and it was this guy who owned a Greek restaurant. Only job she could get because it was a guy who owned it himself. It wasn't a corporate entity. It wasn't like, what do you call it? CVS. You know what I mean? There weren't rules about stuff. She said, Dad, he's down there smoking weed in the office every morning. I said, yes, he is. That's what managers of Greek restaurants do. And then she said, well, there's this recipe that calls for a third of a bottle of beer. But he puts a third of the bottle of beer in it. And then instead of saving the 2/3 of the bottle of beer for the other 2 recipes, he takes it downstairs and drinks it. I said, yeah, that's why you own a restaurant. That's why you're the boss.
Mark, that was brilliant. And it's like, that's the whole point, is to create new myths and new archetypes and not just settle for the old ones. But the weird job question is for Susie, my wife. She worked as a worm farmer once.
Oh my
God. So let's go to forming, in your filmmaking too, forming your framing aesthetic. What guided you to frame your framing aesthetic? And I'm going to set it up because I want to get deeper. You know, Robert Frank came along and we all say, well, you don't have to frame like that. You can frame like this or like this, you know, and it helped us, you know, open up. And there were other people, but I think Robert Frank was important there. And then I asked Bruce Bailey in Ann Arbor once, I says, how'd you form your framing aesthetic? Because, you know, experimental filmmakers are always like sticking the cameras in the bushes and all this stuff. And he goes, well, I remember Jean Cocteau saying he formed his framing aesthetic by the way they put the knife and fork and spoon on your plate and on your table.
Mm.
Isn't that amazing? So, you know, it's like one is who determined the framing aesthetic way back, and then what guided your framing aesthetic?
Well, that's a great question. By the way, I keep worrying that I'm repeating myself from 13 years ago, but there was a story once about how it was Ernie Gear and Stan Brakhage and Ken Jacobs, and you know, Stan Brakhage would go to see anything in any mall. You know what I mean? Like he was this avant-garde guy, but he would go to see, you know, whatever Christmas movies or whatever was out, he'd go see it. Yeah. So Ken Jacobs and Ernie Gear were in town, and I might be telling this story wrong, but they went to a matinee of some stupid movie, and then they said, this is really dull. So let's all stand on our heads and see if it makes it any better. So there were all these three middle-aged men, you know, turned upside down in the theater, like watching the thing upside down for like, you know, for a while.
Yeah.
And then somebody went and complained. So the manager came and said, what are you guys doing standing on your head? And they said, we're just trying to make an interesting movie out of this, you know?
No, Mark, you repeat on, my brother. You told me that story. I don't think it's in the interview. You told me that years ago, and I've repeated that at least once a year at every film lecture I give. And here's how I tell it: that Stan and Ken went to a film and they went up and looked at the screen from right next to the screen framing, you know, and it was like, then the management says, you can't do that. And it's like, well, you know, who determined why you have to look at a film a certain way, you know? But it is good that we're able to experience people who shift it, whereas everybody goes, you go in a film, you sit in the chair and you look at the film this way, you know. And so they, you know, it's just like how it's actually Stravinsky. Most people don't know what they like. They like what they know. So if everybody frames some, but you know, again, how did you form your aesthetic for framing? Just by seeing other people, or where do you think it came from?
You know, I often feel like it's been a while since I've really just gone out and explored with the camera, and it hurts me to say that, but I think you know, I'm a street photographer named Mark Street, and there's not a whole lot going on the street these days. You know, there's more and more going on in the street these days, but you know, I sort of, you know, that thing about finding a frame, and you know, I like to throw myself into complicated vistas, and then move the camera around, and then sort of say, "Whoa, hold it! Look at that! Look at the way this cigar." By the way, people don't smoke enough anymore. I have a photographer friend. He said 2 things have changed since he became a photographer. People don't wear hats, and they don't smoke enough. So you don't get the texture of the smoke coming out of people's mouths, and you don't get hats either, which I thought was great. But anyway, you know, look at the way the guy in Herald Square is, you know, like the smoke is coming out of his cigar, and look at the way his, the person next to him is sort of shrinking from it. And I just try to find the inner dynamic in any situation.
Yeah.
And I'm inspired by people who I shot a film in Uruguay, as you know, Hasta Nunca, and my Spanish was rudimentary. But I knew a little bit of what I was doing. But a lot of times I'd shoot these scenes, and I had a producer who was Uruguayan, and he would sort of help me direct it, or I would say let's go for this thing. But then they'd go off in their rapid fire Spanish, and I wouldn't know what they were saying. But I would try to find the frame that was, what's the word, outside of the words, right? I would try to find the frame that was beyond language, beyond language. And I think that's the antidote to shot counter shot. Gerry, you've said your line. Now we're going to cut to Mark. Mark's going to say his line. Okay, Gerry, back to your line. Okay, let's do a two-shot, et cetera, et cetera. Another great film, instructive, is Laura Poitras's first film, My Country, My Country, I think it's called. She lived with a family in Iraq, and she didn't speak the language, but she filmed the whole time, and she could sense these arguments going on. She could sense the tension, and she could sense the drama without understanding what was going on. So then she came back, and she worked with an editor, obviously, who spoke Arabic, and then she said, "Oh, that's what they were talking about." But the frame, she found the frame by looking, not by listening. So I would answer it that way.
Mark, that was brilliant, because another stupid but fun anecdote about Laura Poitras, whose other film on Ed Snowden won her an Oscar. It's amazing. And I was talking to Scott McDonald, who you brought up with us 13 years ago, a great historian and book writer about experimental film. And I said, have you seen, this Snowden film that Laura Poitras wrote? And he goes, I just saw it the other night with my wife. And I says, this reminds me of Ernie Gear. Just before he said that to me, I said, did you know she studied with Ernie Gear? And he goes, are you kidding? So that is amazing. She went to San Francisco to be a chef. She studied with Ernie. Then she becomes probably one of the most incredible documentarians in America for that little slot, until she did the Julian and Assange film, and it was like, uh-oh. So we can go with that later, but this was really good what you said. That's called nonverbal communication. That's T.S. Eliot said poetry can communicate before it's understood. So you were communicating nonverbally, that was really well put. So there's another question I want to bring up, Mark, is your take. Now, I don't want to go into it too deep and long, but your take on, the female gaze. So, the male gaze, female gaze, and just the human gaze. My friend insists that humans invented eye gazing, that it might be hardwired in us. It might be something humans invented. We don't know. But the big thing was it came out with Nina Menkins really bringing it out, and actually Laura Mulview, I think is her name, brought it out more. You know what I'm talking about, this female gaze issue. Okay, so then there's this woman who they made a documentary on her about a year or two ago. Her name's Alice something, and she helped invent cinema, like with Méliès. You know about this lady?
No.
I mean, you will freak out. I mean, Lynn's, you guys most people go, how did I not know about this? So she was there inventing narrative cinema. They go, she invented narrative cinema. So, just boil it down. Did she start female gaze and then it got hijacked by males? Or is there really a different thing of male and female gaze? And just to make it more complex, did we all grow up with male gaze dominance, because those were the guys who painted those were the people who painted all the paintings and shot all the photographs. So then we're destined to frame and look at things the way males did. Although we know women were making paintings, and who were making the cave paintings, more women or more men, who were making the sculptures. So just any sort of thoughts on this. Is there a difference between the male and female gaze, and is it something we should worry about, or what?
Sure. I mean, I think it's an interesting question. I just taught a class called Representation in Art, and we were reading, John Berger. Of course, this is all John Berger, ways of seeing, as
That's
you said.
Good, yes.
Laura Mulvey, visual pleasure and narrative cinema and things like that. And, I think it's interesting. Yeah, I think there's a male gaze. I think we're hard put to find films that embody the female gaze, right? That don't just contradict the male gaze, but actually show us what what it is to look in a from a female perspective. And I think it is hardwired in. And John Berger makes that argument. He talks about portraiture, he talks about the paintings and who paid for the paintings and all that kind of stuff. What's the answer? Well, I don't know. I guess one really, really kind of shallow answer is the Bechdel test, right? Alison Bechdel test. I think it's the Bechdel-Wallace test. Do you know what that is? You heard of that?
Tell me about it. Is it a B or a V? Bechdel B?
Bechdel. Alison Bechdel. Bechdel. She's a columnist. She had a great column called I'm forgetting it. Something about dykes who have fun or something like that. But anyway, Then she wrote a great book called Fun Home, which was about her father, who was an undertaker and also a closeted homosexual. Really great graphic novel. But anyway, her test is this, and I'm probably going to mangle it, but it's all about screen time. How many female characters do we have on the screen, and are they talking about something that's not a man? You know what I mean? Are they?
Yeah.
That's the kind of shallow kind of place where we are. And just to extrapolate it a little bit, I showed my students The Hurt Locker by Catherine Bigelow, who's sort of an interesting character, and that she also went to the San Francisco Art Institute, and embodies this sort of macho world of war movies, and The Hurt Locker is a movie that treats the Iraqis as other, right? As people, the guy's always got a bomb. We're always afraid of the guy with the cell phone. What's that guy looking at me over here? Is he going to set off a bomb? The North Americans are the ones with the speaking parts, right? They're the ones we care about. And I contrast it with Battle of Algiers, which of course is an attempt to humanize the Algerians, right? And to see them as encircled by the colonists, the French, and at least create some sort of a fair fight between colonialism and anti-colonialism. So you were talking about the male gaze and the female gaze from a sexual standpoint, maybe, right? And I'm just sort of extrapolating it into a geopolitical, realm. And by the way, Battle of Algiers, the Pentagon shows that film to its troops before they go into, into these areas where resistance fighters are operating, right? Sort of like this is what you're up against, right? You're up against this organization that doesn't play by our rules, nor should it.
No,
Um,
but Mark, this is an amazing. You're teaching your students with one of the greatest films ever made. Because Battle of Algiers, not alone, not let alone is it used by Bush and his Pentagon as a training film. It's used by the Black Panthers and the RIA as a training film.
of
So
course,
and it's a fake documentary. It
yes.
is everybody in it except one person is an actor. So I mean, we could talk about that forever. But you used a word that's really important in this doing Hurt Locker with Battle of Algiers is brilliant. And you said humanize. So when Errol Morris put out fog of war, I said you're humanizing a war criminal. And my Susie's dad, who worked for Cesar Chavez and in the Black Panthers and as a social worker activist, he says humanizing anyone is a good thing. And it was like, whoa, that was a heavy thing to, because we know Earl Morris is a good progressive lefty, but, it was like, what are you giving him 90 minutes of screen time? What, to hang himself? So what? Everybody will just go, well, now, I understand he's a human. And it's like we should be putting him in jail for being a war criminal. So sorry to rant, but the word I wanted to get is humanize. So McLuhan said that our technologies, anything we invent, language, cinema, cell phones, are the most human thing. That our technologies are, and then he says everything we invent extends some humanness. So the cinema shutter is an extension of our eyelid, on, off, on, off. So now we're going to go to the artist. This is what McLuhan learned from Ezra Pound, that the artists are the antenna of the race, and they're broadcasting the hidden psychic effects of these inventions, spoken word, printed word, cinema. And then we can learn how to cope with what we don't like about them. And so the big question McLuhan came up with was, why do we still ignore the hidden psychic effects of how cinema changes our behavior, how spoken word changes our behavior? And why do we ignore them, Mark? Why do humans ignore the hidden psychic effects, even though we can look to the artist to reveal them to us?
Maybe we're afraid of them.
Yeah.
Maybe they're too deep. Maybe they speak too. I was talking earlier about dismissing a film.
Yes.
The difference between taste or between critical engagement and
complain.
Was that the question?
Yeah.
Was that the dichotomy?
No, it was complaining and critical thinking.
Thank you. But maybe a complaint, that, I mean, not to be sexist, but, the lady doth protest too much or something. You know what I mean? And maybe the more something angers us or bores us or alienates us, maybe the more there is to teach us, something like Jean Dielman, the Chantal Akerman film, right? The spaces in the movie, the vacuousness of it, the moments where we're just sort of left to look and with ourselves. I mean, that's scary. That's scary for people. So we need to listen to that. And, not to get too into psychoanalysis or anything, but, that which scares us is what we should investigate the most, right? So if you were to say, I hated this movie, I hated him, I hated it, the question would be, why? And why so angry?
Yeah.
Why, what was it about it? What hit you? What made you feel that your 5 minutes of time on this earth could have been better spent than
Yeah.
with this film. You know, I mean, you show students, you know, the screen tests by Andy Warhol, right? And some of them are just blown away, and they're like, "Oh my god, it's the most uncomfortable experience in the world, and it was weird, and it was this, it was that," you know. And then some of them are like, "Oh my god, what is this? Jeez, he just turns on the camera. I don't know what is this," you know. And you know, that's the kind of critical analysis and complication that that's interesting, you know.
Yeah.
I showed Portrait of Jason. You know that film, Shirley
Yeah.
Clark.
Oh yeah.
It's such a weird film, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, all the students are like, "What is this?" And you know, these days there's issues of, you know, white privileged filmmaker and a black gay man, and people are nervous about that, and they wonder about privilege, and they wonder about you know, they wonder about what's it called, permission, and things like that. So one student said she should have stopped serving him drinks. I said, well, he was asking for the drinks, you know. You know, and you know, what is this, date rape? No, I mean, he asked for a drink, she gave him a drink. What do you want, you know? But anyway, this one student, he said, I just have never seen anything like it, and I can't figure it out. I don't know who is in control. I don't know who's bullshitting who. I don't know who was telling the truth. I don't know who was on top. You know what I mean? I don't know who was. I don't know who the power balance is, and I'm just so confused. I thought, well, that's a successful foray into the cinematic tissue.
That is brilliant. I wish I could be a student in your class. I would learn so much. And I appreciate you doing that. So we'll go into moral obligation, because it's sort of like, you know, the history of art, literature, everything is these people telling you about how fucked up shit is and not coddling you to make it nice. And then that's the great art. I mean, there's a lot of variation there. So it's like, well, don't act like that. Don't be a junkie robbing people. But if you write a great story based on your life when you were that way, you might enlighten the whole world. So you mean you want me to fake that I was a criminal junkie and then write the book about it? Oh, no. Well, how am I going to do that? So this is, does the artist have moral obligation? You know, and it works. It's a big picture question, because if you're shooting a film of street kids in Brazil and two of them start beating the shit out of each other, do you put the camera down and stop the fight, or do you film it so that the world's going to find out about this and maybe do something? So, you know, it's like, it's the big question is, does the artist have a moral obligation? Any moral obligations?
Such a big question. Such a big question. You know, the artist holds up a mirror to the world as it is, right? And to sanitize it is wrong, and to ignore it is wrong. And you know, I think we're in an age where people are afraid of brutality. You know, they're afraid of I showed Land Without Bread too. You know, and students.
Yeah, now you're talking.
What's going on? Is he making fun of these people? Is he, you know, why didn't he help them? And oh, these people are dying in the movie. So you know, so that's the ultimate movie that, you know, that begs this question, right? Do we need to intervene in the world? Do we need to make it better?
Yeah.
And there's an argument that showing the world as it is, as brutal as it is, changes opinions and changes minds. You know, it's an interesting question. You know, and you sort of say, what would change your mind, Gerry? What you know, would the shot of the two kids beating each other up, would that cause you to vote differently, or
Yeah.
to question U.S. policy or not? I asked my students over the years, I say, all this time, all this power that art has, all this power that movies has, what's a movie? What's a book? Something that's changed your mind. You vote differently. You volunteer at a soup kitchen. You know what I mean? You change careers. What is it? What is that piece of art? You know what a big one is? The Jungle
Good.
by Upton Sinclair.
You got it.
A lot of vegetarians out there.
Mark, that's my theory is great artists will fuck your shit up and say, I can do that. You see Tribulation 99 and go, I could edit that together. And then it's like, wait a minute. He put LaRouche's name in the middle of that. And he spouted that an alien shot Kennedy. What's up with this shit? Because I would show Tribulation to real heavy political researchers and they go, that's true. That's true. And they go, you can't put that with that. They would like be pissed at Craig because he mixed, real deep political research with like, well, you can't even say the word conspiracy theories anymore. It's like totally changed. So you so much helped me. Something that changed your mind. How would that change your mind? That is really good. Land Without Bread, to go back for a second, Mark. I have this theory, and I'd love to get your reaction to it. Buñuel faked shooting the sheep. So he said, let's have a puff of smoke come off the screen over here, and then the sheep dies, and say the sheep died from starvation, and then you see the puff of smoke and everybody goes, they shot that sheep, and he goes, no, let's fake it and have the puff of smoke and you really use a sheep that died naturally. It's like, let me ask you this one. I know I probably have, just really quick. Did Kubrick pull Clockwork Orange from UK screens only for 30 years because he knew it was a good publicity stunt, or because he truly thought his film was causing kids to beat up winos?
You're asking for a direct answer from me.
No, I'm just saying your hunch, whatever. James Harris sat right here where I interviewed you, worked on 8 Kubrick films with him. He says Stanley was about 2 things, family and films. And he didn't want his family to be beaten up by these kids who saw his film. Stanley didn't think his film caused people to be violent. He knows there's a bigger zeitgeist going on there, and you can't just say, oh my God. So why did he pull it only from the UK screens? You could go to London and buy a bootleg copy in VHS anyways.
Yeah.
So it's like, what the fucking deal is that? Because the British government strong-armed him and said, oh, pull this film, for 30 years. That's like, give me a break. He's laughing. He's up in heaven laughing right now going, But what's your hunch? Was Kubrick really afraid that these kids watch his film and go beat people up? Or he just went along with it because he didn't want to mess with the cops in London?
I am happy to say that I have no understanding of Kubrick at all. Love him, but I would not venture to second guess him for even a microsecond.
Yeah.
And that's good.
Yeah. And so another thing I would love to get your feelings on is George Manupelli, his mantra was ignore yourself. Jonas Mekas says there is no self-expression. And Cecil Taylor, jazz pianist, says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. So is art making, filmmaking, literature more, I know it's both and it depends, but more self-expression or more vehicles for whatever dominant culture or technology is present?
Well, I think it sort of gets into the notion of what is the self. Is it an amalgam of what's going on? Is it a bunch of influences? Is it a bunch of ripoffs? Is it what you happen to be thinking at that moment? And I tend to, let me put it this way. I don't even know how I operate, but I really, I really admire people who are mimics, and who allow the world to come through them. And there's a story about Bob Dylan. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not, as with all things with him. But he was in a recording session with the Grateful Dead in San Francisco, and wasn't working. And he went out for a walk, and he went to some jazz club in a hotel. It wasn't even an interesting venue, right? And he just sat there for 40 minutes. And he said, "All right, just the spheres are telling me to do it like this, And it's not to say he went back and made a jazz album with the Grateful Dead, but it's saying that he let the world come through him, right? That he let whatever he was listening to, he let whatever whatever he was looking at, whatever was going on in his world, come through, And I think that's the I don't know if it's the abnegation of self, or it's validates the self more. But whatever it is, it has to do with listening. It has to do with looking. It has to do with not being afraid to imitate, not being afraid to be a medium. To let things come through you.
Yeah. Well, Mark, you've given me 90 minutes. Can you go another 10?
Yeah.
Okay. So that was beautiful, because T.S. Eliot said, great artists steal, immature artists imitate. So is perception reality?
Is perception reality? Sure.
Yeah. Moshe Feldenkrais says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength. We're normally taught to overcome a weakness, but tell me a weakness that you've incorporated to become a strength.
That's a really good. It's a really good question. I think that a lot of times I like to be alone, and I like to just wander, and I like to not have a plan, and you either fight that and you say, let me get a script writer to tell me what to do, or you say, that's that. I mean, Jonas Mekas, near the end of his life, of course, he was, a lot older than I am, but he said, I never have a plan. I never have a date book. I never have a to-do list. I never know what I'm going to do. I wake up in the morning and I never know what I'm going to do. And I figure it out as soon as I wake up. I say, well, then I'll figure out what I'm going to do. And I think that's admirable. I don't think I'm there yet. Maybe I shouldn't be there, but I like it as an ethos.
It's beautiful, Mark. It's the flaneurs. It's all the guys who changed everything in Paris in the 20s. Duchamp, Joyce, all of them. they were flaneurs. They said, let's just sit at the coffee house and do nothing. And we'll have an epiphany in everydayness, and that's psychogeography. And you put it in regular terms. That's what I like. And you flip that into a strength just to be able to articulate it. So I thank you. Let's do these 5 quick Alan Watts questions, just off the top of your head, 3 to 5 word answers. Who started it all?
Can't answer that. I'm going to pass.
Are we going to make it?
Yes.
Where do we put it?
We don't put it anywhere. We don't try to store it. The danger is in trying to store it, right? We grab little parts of it and we make work out of it, but we don't try to store it. We don't try to catalog it. We don't try to put it on a hard drive. We just try to grab onto these moments and enjoy them while we can.
Damn, dude, you're my hero. That's Tom Waits said, the best music doesn't want to be recorded. That is like, there's 2 more Alan Watts. That was beautiful. Who's cleaning it up?
Who's cleaning it up? Oh boy, I don't envy them. The question should be who's making it more dirty.
Well, you're the pinnacle of all these interviews, because the whole point is to reinvent new questions. Don't just settle for me asking these stupid questions, but how do you reinvent it and reinvent new metaphors? The more important question is, what was it? Not who's cleaning it up. It's, who's making it more dirty?
Exactly.
I want to meet that person. Okay, last Alan Watts question is it serious?
Never.
Never. I love that. He's certain. Okay, just a couple more, Mark. Joseph Boyce said, make the secrets productive. Lou Welsh said, guard the secrets, constantly reveal them. But it was Thornton Wilder in 28. He said, art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. No, I'm glad you laughed. Now, if I'm not implying by asking this question that you haven't, you've laid your cards on the table. You're very articulate. I've had fun and learned a lot. What's it really all about for you?
I think I love that. I love the idea. I mean, I think, conceal, reveal. Those are the two intended, opposites, right? You show certain things and you hold certain things back. And if something's too obvious, then it's MSNBC, right? Then it's reporting. Yeah. And if it's too obtuse, it can seem too pleased with itself, right? So you want to get that mix of what you're elucidating, and then what you're holding back, and what you're challenging people how you're challenging them to insert themselves in the work, because that's what obtuseness is, or that's what concealing is. It's asking someone to put themselves into that work, and then whether it's narrative or it's abstract or whatever, it's sort of saying, put yourself in there. What do you think?
Yeah. But can art making be egoless?
Can art making be egoless? No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
If you were walking down the street today, you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
I would say, keep exploring, and make as many mistakes as you can.
Nice. I would add an addendum. Let's go to the movie theater and have a nap together. let's go fall asleep at the new movie.
I like it, Gerry. I learned so much from this. This is great.
Yeah. Okay. What's the healthiest? Just two more. Sorry. What's the healthiest cultural shift you see developing today?
The healthiest cultural shift.
Yeah. Some sort of shift, not healthy, but cultural shift.
I think that the media is becoming cheaper and cheaper, right? And in our day, Gerry, whenever the hell that was, you know,
yeah,
you needed a certain sort of cultural capital, and you needed a certain sort of bank capital to shoot 16 millimeter film, and you needed a equipment and an apparatus. And now you get these students and just kids with cell phones, and there's this guy running for mayor in New York. His name is Paperboy Prince. He's so great. Look him up. He's so great. And he's running against the main guy who the person to beat. His name is Eric Adams, and he's the borough president. And he made when he was a state senator, he made this little PSA, and he said, "Here's how to search your kid's room, and here's how you find the crack pipe, and here's how you find the gun, and here's how you find the bullets, and don't trust your kids. There's no Second Amendment in your house, and you get in there and you be a tough parent, and here's how you search your kid's room, You got to look these things up. I'll send them to you. They're hilarious. So this guy, Paperboy Prince, who dresses and, and he's, transvestite and everything. So he made this response, and he's like, "Eric Adams, you stay out of my room."
Everybody say, what's the difference between LA and New York? In LA, they have a bumper sticker. It's not, have you asked your kids about, drugs today? It's, have you raided your kids' pot stash today?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. No, it's hilarious. Yeah, and this is just a guy with a cell phone. It's beautiful.
Yep. No, it's an amazing phenomenon. It's beautiful. You're not like, oh, now everybody's making a film and there's more trash. It's like, no, it's the Jean Cocteau said it years ago. He says film will become an art form when its materials are as cheap as paper and pencil.
Yeah.
He nailed it. So last question, Mark, I appreciate your time and energy. This has been truly enlightening. I hope there's never a last question with us, but what gives you the most optimism?
It gives me the most optimism that there are always things to make work about, right? There are always things to view. There's always vignettes. There's always drama. There's always more and more. I'm sort of coming out of my shell a little bit. I'm riding my bike around. I'm sitting in a restaurant and having a milkshake, and I'm eavesdropping on a conversation. And that'll never end. That'll never, ever end. There'll always be some kind of drama. Not the kind of drama you construct, but the drama that you eavesdrop on, And that's what really gives me that's what keeps me going, A walk without a destination, a chance conversation, some weird interaction, I find it it gives me a lot of optimism.
Yeah. Okay, Mark Street, I love you. That was an amazing time. I hope it can happen again soon. And thank you.
Thank you, Gerry. It's always a pleasure. Thank you.